All right. Well, hello everyone. Thanks for coming out. Everyone doing all right tonight? Yeah. Awesome. As Winston said, we got lots of food and beverages, so please don't hold back. So tonight we're going to kind of talk about common operational challenges with Node, common things that might be easy for advanced people, but might be forgotten by beginners. So hopefully there's something in this talk that's good for everybody. A little bit about myself. I am a Solutions Architect Manager here at NodeSource. I'm a longtime Node developer and one of the co-organizers of this wonderful meetup. When I get a chance, I also try to be a mentor at Node School Oakland. If you're not familiar with Node School, nodeschool.io, I highly recommend if you have good experience with Node. We always need more mentors. If you're still learning Node, always plenty of room for beginners to get good questions answered. Finally, I am one of the few Node.js on Windows advocates that will admit so publicly. So if you have questions about building Node on Windows, running Node on Windows, feel free to ask. Finally, I am at Joe Doyle 23 pretty much everywhere on the internet. Fortunately, I have such a common name. It aligns with congressmen, Olympic swimmers, professional photographers, all sorts of people that steal all my domains. So I work at NodeSource. NodeSource has been a longtime sponsor of SFNode. We sponsor the videos. Tonight we sponsor the venue. Dan kind of mentioned a little bit about NodeSource. We just kind of wanted to talk a little bit to make sure everyone's familiar with what we do here. So we are looking to offer commercial support for Node.js. We do that mainly through our nsolid runtime, which is a drop-in replacement of Node.js. Has a little bit of extra security features as well as insight into your Node.js processes. So if you are running a company and relying on Node for commercial uses, definitely come by NodeSource, take a look at our nsolid offering, and see if it might be a good fit for you. But here at NodeSource, we're not just about selling commercial products. We have a lot of people on staff that are very involved in the open source community. We are a platinum member of the Node.js Foundation. Rod Vag, which you may know, he gave a great keynote at Node Interactive just last week, is our chief Node officer. He gets to work on Node full time. Courtesy of NodeSource. We also have actually 4 core team contributors on staff right now. We actually have a new one added. And we also have at least 12 team members actively contributing to the Node.js working groups. I don't think that counts me yet in that count. So not only are we working to do commercial offerings for Node.js, but we're also very involved in making sure that the open source version of Node stays healthy and vibrant and alive. So Dan mentioned our products, nsolid, a hardened and secure Node.js platform. Brand new NodeSource certified modules. You're concerned about what are you bringing in module-wise into your applications. NodeSource certified modules is definitely there to help. Like any good company, we also have services and support. If you're looking for any sort of architectural help or even just general developer questions and you have nowhere else to turn, NodeSource can be there for you to help out. So as Dan mentioned, we're just going to quickly touch, throughout some of the slides, there's some great spots where nsolid really can help, without being able to do an actual demo for everybody of nsolid. Just wanted to let you know that we'll kind of peek in under the hood from time to time is how can nsolid actually help with some of our challenges. But everything that we're talking about tonight really applies also to the open source project. So we're not by any means trying to sales pitch you, even though we are in our own house. So what are we going to cover tonight? So tonight really talking about installing and updating Node.js, mainly focused on production. We'll cover a little bit on your own local development machine, but really a lot of the stuff we want to talk about is focused on production. You're past the prototyping stage, and you're really ready to go live. We'll talk about modules, everybody's favorite topic. What are good modules? What are bad modules? How do I tell? Running your Node.js application in production. There are lots of ways to do it, and we have some opinions on some of the better ways to do it. Also performance. You finally got your app running, you got customers paying for it. Are there operational concerns that you need to worry about? Where is Node going to fall over? Where did I make a mistake coding? So installation and updates. For the most part, hopefully, as Node developers, you have that down on your development machine, that you know where to go to install Node, and you get that running. The Node.js website is the place to go, especially for your development environment. You got the Windows installer, Mac installer, Linux tarballs are there. But for Linux, we also have some little bit better options, especially for production, is NodeSource hosts repos for all the major Linux platforms to install Node through your package manager on your operating system. And that's really a major benefit to running in production, is that you can use your same patching mechanisms to also keep up to date with Node. So finally, always use an LTS version in production. Unless you want to be really super cutting edge and really pushing the features that are available in Node 7, try to stay with LTS. Life will just be easier, things will run smoother, and you'll probably have less problems overall. So now that you got Node installed, it's very important that you keep up to date with Node. Once you're on the LTS branch, there are still updates. They're not as frequent as if you're running on the odd number versions of Node, like Node 7. But it's also important that as you're rolling out your environment, what is your plan for updating Node? You know, we're on v4 is LTS, v6 is on LTS. There will be a Node 8. So even though that you're not moving it to new versions today, it's important to have a plan for how to move to those new versions. You know, as we mentioned, the NodeSource repos make it really easy because you can use your built-in upgrading tools when you want to upgrade your packages to get the latest versions. And for the most part, LTS versions should always be safe. Now, we kind of say always a little tentatively because like any good project, it is maintained by humans. Humans sometimes make mistakes. So any good recommendation, test it out in staging, test it out on your local machine. Make sure you have an idea of what your application is going to run like on a new version, even if it is an LTS, just to kind of have a little safeguard as you're going. But for the most part, LTS is relatively safe. There's a lot of work that goes into the LTS branches to make sure that nothing is breaking in between those updates. And finally, if you're into containers like the cool hip kids, you know, Docker makes it really easy to do some of these upgrades because you can literally just swap out a base image that says instead of Node 4, use Node 6. Instead of Node 6, use Node 7. So NodeSource also has some Docker images by Node, but the Node.js project now also has its own hosted Docker images. So we kind of recommend those now because those are maintained by the open source project themselves. So that was kind of a quick rundown on installing. For the most part, I don't think a lot of people get tripped up on installs, but really the key takeaway is have an upgrade plan. There are security issues that come out for Node every once in a while. You know, OpenSSL is a common culprit of that. So be ready to upgrade Node in production. Don't try to hang out in an old version. I'll do questions at the end. Sorry. So next up is modules. Everyone loves modules. That's kind of one of the best parts of Node. At the same time, it's also one of the hardest parts of Node. There are over 350,000 modules inside the NPM registry. And that's wonderful. Like, we've got a lot of choice. If you want to do something in Node, there's a very good chance that someone has already written a module for you to do exactly what you're looking to do. The downside is, if you're trying to do something very popular, 15 people might have written a module to do exactly what you need to do. So how do you know which one you should use? In addition, as we talked about, you know, we're all humans, and inevitably there are security vulnerabilities that can creep up inside of our modules. There are a lot of great modules out there that one little thing can kind of destroy your whole application or enter a vulnerability that can take your whole site down. And finally, licenses. If you're a startup, maybe you're usually not super concerned about licenses. If you're a major bank trying to roll out Node, licenses matter a lot. GitHub has done a big push over the last couple of years to try to say, hey, everyone with an open source repo, please just put a license. Doesn't matter which one, pick one. A lot of companies, as they kind of grow to use Node, start to investigate the licenses of their modules, and sometimes they find incompatibilities with their commercial products and the licenses inside their packages. So it's important to know what those licenses are, because you may be a cool startup today, you know, shooting it wild with 3 developers, but in 6 months when you raise a bunch of money and all of a sudden someone comes knocking, suing you for license violation of the module, it's not fun times. I don't believe that's happened yet, but there's probably someone out there waiting to hope that it does. So what can we do? Fortunately, there's a bunch of sanity checks that are pretty easy to kind of do a once-over for modules to determine whether or not these are higher quality or lower quality modules. First and foremost, do they have tests? You know, we're relying on someone else's code, and there's a lot of trust that's involved with that. One way to help increase that trust is to have a test suite that is easy to run and passes. There's also a lot of great badges and things you can do on GitHub to help indicate that yes, you have tests, yes, they're being run maybe by Travis CI on their free open source version. Things like that to really help you out. In addition, we talked about license. Not only is there a license, but is it compatible with your project? In the world of Node, MIT is a super popular license, but it is not the only one. There are GPL-based modules. There are modules with crazy licenses that contain swear words that I'm not going to say. There's all sorts of licenses out there, and you really need to be careful about what you're bringing into your app. Finally, what do our GitHub issues look like? It's great to have a super popular module that has 500 issues and 3 closed. Might be a warning sign. When was their last release? Sometimes code becomes done, right? If you're writing a small module, there's a good chance that you've met the need that it has. So maybe you don't need a release every week. But if you combine that with the number of issues and the last release, maybe the maintainer has walked away. And that's a sad reality when you have 350,000 modules. Not every single one of them is still supported anymore. To help combat that, you can also look at how many collaborators are on the project. Usually, if it's a sole developer, that's not a totally negative sign, but you don't always feel as warm and fuzzy if there's 3 or 4 developers, and if one of them walks away, there might be others that will still carry on with the module and keep it up to date, add new features, things along those lines. Another thing that some people like to use is npm stats. You can go to npmjs.org, pump in the module name, and you get kind of a nice little sidebar like we have up there. And it gives you some nice snapshots as to how often are other people using this module. You start seeing downloads over 10,000 a day. Like, all right, there must be a pretty healthy community that is trusting this module. And then, if all else fails, it's open source. Look at the code. Can't be understated enough. The beauty of JavaScript is it's not compiled. There's no secrets. Take a peek. Take a half an hour. Look at the module you're using. If you're building a business using Node, kind of the least you can do is kind of peek under the hood. What are these modules doing? Just to make sure you understand what's happening inside of your application. So again, this kind of checklist is a summation, right? No one of these things should discourage you from using any module. But as you bring modules into your project, put them all together. What is your gut feeling when you look at all these things comparing a module? Is it like, all right, well, this looks okay. It looks like it's relatively updated. Or is it like, wow, this is a ghost town, and I'm pretty sure no one will ever touch this again, right? So just a little sanity check when it comes to bringing modules in. So finally, vulnerabilities. This is a tricky one, right? Because it's open source. It's safe, right? Yeah, no big deal. Fortunately, there are projects out there like the Node Security Project, which just recently has been entered into the Node.js Foundation, which is great. There's also companies like SNCC that are actual security researchers combing through all the popular Node.js modules that exist in the ecosystem and checking them for vulnerabilities. There are lots of large companies that were nice early adopters to Node and really kind of helped pave the way for making Node very popular, got burned with some vulnerabilities. It's the reality, right? Code is complicated, the web is complicated, security is complicated. So definitely do your due diligence to check your applications, make sure that you're not bringing in vulnerable modules, and if you are, a lot of these advisories have the remedy. What is the newer version? What is the patch? How do I fix this? So I highly recommend taking a look at that, especially for your application. You'll be shocked to know what actually is vulnerable. And that's one spot that NSolid comes in. I thought we'd sneak away from that, huh? And one thing we do with NSolid in our runtime is we've actually partnered with SNCC, and we automatically scan your module, all the modules that are loaded inside your Node runtime while your application is running. So if a new vulnerability comes out while your application is deployed, the NSolid console will pop that up for you and tell you. And again, because we partner with SNCC, if there is a remedy, if there is a patch, we'll have that all available for you, and you can actually go ahead and patch your application and know that preemptively without having to worry about doing it before a deploy step. So now the fun parts. We've got Node installed. We've gone through and vetted some modules. Now we're ready to run our Node.js applications. So first and foremost is process management. One of the great things about Node is it's single-threaded. It's easy to reason about. You know only one thing is ever happening. Downside is if the thread dies, so does your application. So unhandled exceptions, crash, you're down. Unhandled exception handler, can you recover? Maybe not. It's best to log and bail. Node.js is great because it starts so fast. I used to be a .NET developer. I know there's Java developers out there. Those runtimes are runtimes, and they load into memory, and you're kind of waiting, and it takes a little bit. But Node is fast. It's really fast. So don't worry about, oh, how do we maintain our Node app for weeks at a time? Handle your exceptions that make sense. Let the exceptions that don't make sense fall through, and have an appropriate restart policy. Definitely recommend logging to know when your Node app is restarting. Don't just say, oh yeah, when crash, restart, and not know that, oh, maybe it's restarted 4,000 times in the last hour. It's definitely a dangerous situation that I have seen before. So when it comes to restarting our application, what should we do? How should we handle that? The best approach that I've seen and the recommendations that we like to give are use the tools that already exist. If you're running in production, there's a very, very good chance you're running on a Linux-based system, and those come with amazing service managers that will automatically handle restarting your application, stop your application from restarting 1,000 times in an hour, help with alerting and logging, all that great stuff. So the two main ones that are kind of around the world today are Upstart, which is super popular in Ubuntu, and Systemd, which is starting to also take over for Upstart, but is also widely available on most operating systems. Again, makes it real easy. We've got a great guide at NodeSource about running your node processes with Systemd. These slides will be posted, so if you don't memorize the links right now, that's fine. You'll be able to look them up on the Meetup site. But great guide to saying, how do I run one process on the server using Systemd, ranging all the way up to how do I run 8? In addition, we have built-in, or not built-in, but modules that are part of the ecosystem that also help to solve this problem. Modules like PM2, Forever, NodeMon, all ways of also trying to restart your app. While those work, and there are a lot of companies use them with no problems at all, our general recommendation usually still falls back to use the OS. You'll find less headaches, and it's just a little bit easier sometimes. So on to performance. We got our app running in production, everything's installed, things are great, right? We're making money, customers are hitting our site. So when you use a single thread in Node, CPU usage becomes a very, very important aspect of monitoring Node. Blocking that event loop in the single thread causes Node to stall out. And the benefit of Node is that we can take all sorts of requests, always responding over and over again really fast on that single thread. So when we stop that thread, everybody waits. We freeze the whole world. So the good news, though, is V8 is very fast, right? It is unbelievably fast, nearing the speeds of native C++ compiled code. Google is doing an amazing job with that. But we still do need to be smart about things we're doing inside Node to make sure we're getting the most throughput we can and that the event loop is ticking as fast as it can and requests are being responded to. Some of the gotchas that kind of sneak up on people sometimes are synchronous loops. Everyone is familiar, Node and asynchronous programming, that's great. And oftentimes in development, yeah, that array.forEach, not such a big deal, or that for loop seems to go pretty fast when I'm testing it on my server. But you really need to be mindful of loops that have a variable number of iterations. On your development machine, are you loading 2 users? And production, you might load 10,000. That'll freeze up your event loop very quick. And you won't even think about it on your development machine because your test data just didn't show that. So the good news is, though, there are modules like async, which I highly recommend checking out, that let you asynchronously run all your loops and with great control. If you want to run a loop that feels like it is synchronous, there's a function for that. If you want to run things synchronously, maybe 4 or 5 at a time, there's a function for that. So if you haven't looked at the async module, it's a great way to escape the trap of, oh, it's just a small for loop, or oh, it's a small array, it won't be a big deal. and then finding out in production when QA puts 5,000 things inside that array that, why did response times triple? Well, that's why. Another secret performance killer is JSON parsing. JSON is so closely tied to Node. We use it all the time for our RESTful APIs. It's our main data passing format. But there's an unfortunate underbelly to the beautiful world of JSON. And that is JSON.parse is slow and it is blocking. Now again, this is the same kind of trap. You're in development. You've got a tiny little JSON string. Man, that JSON parse is fast. But then your app kind of scales in a way you didn't expect, and someone sent you 500K of JSON. And everything kind of hung up for a little bit. That's weird. I actually had to troubleshoot this at a previous job where we were unexpectedly getting much larger JSON objects because it was a different format of logging, and they just threw it on there. And even though we could handle it on the computation side, man, that initial parsing just choked response times for everybody else. So there are modules to help. There is a module called JSON Stream that tries to, technology, fantastic. So as I was saying, JSON Stream is a module that can help do streaming parsing of JSON that's coming in. Again, not everybody is dealing with 100K of JSON objects, and if you can, break it up. But that's one of those things that sneaks in on production that you might just not realize until you're wondering why your response times just tripled. So how do we troubleshoot CPU issues, right? It's kind of a core thing, because if you let the CPU get out of control, response times go high, inevitably things lock up, and you're in trouble now, or you're in production. What are we doing here? So the good news is we can actually use V8, which supports generating CPU profiles. What this does is this takes a sampling of all the functions that are called inside your application for a set amount of time, writes it out into a known format, and then we can use tools to analyze that. We have great built-in tooling now in Node 4 and Node 6 with the prof and prof process flags. It's a two-step process. Using prof, it generates an output file that is the recording of all the function calls that happened during that set time period. And then prof process runs through it and kind of makes it in a more human-readable format to help you get an idea of what exactly all the information that was captured. The fun stuff is now we have a new inspect flag in Node 6. It came in through a new version of V8. It is experimental though. So things are changing with it, but the idea is you can start your node process in development, not production, with -- inspect. It spits out a Chrome URL. You can pipe that into your Chrome browser and actually use the Chrome dev tools to natively debug and use some analysis inside your code. So really slick. If you haven't played with that, I highly recommend it. It's really cool. At Nsolid, we took this a step further. Because we control the runtime, we actually have this integrated inside of Nsolid directly. So what you can do is you can actually do a CPU profile right from the browser while your application is running in production. Again, this isn't the kind of thing you want to run all the time because there is a big performance hit to do a CPU profile in production. But if you are having production issues and you are in big trouble, this is a lifesaver. So not only that, but we can also have thresholds. So while your application is running, you can set some thresholds saying if my application hits over 90% CPU for more than 10 seconds, let's take a 5-second CPU profile. Let's debug this and see what's going on. But the amazing part, and the part that really wowed me the first time I saw this, is through inside the browser, not only do we generate it, but we do all the heavy lifting of parsing and visualizing and let you drill down through the 3 different visualizations we have for a CPU profile and actually see the stack trace that's generating that large CPU usage. So it's really amazing for when your CPU is going nuts, you don't know why. You can pop into here, click on the flame graph, and see exactly where the CPU is being used up. Another fun thing in JavaScript and Node are memory leaks. So unlike some other languages where you can kind of allocate memory and just forget about it, it's not exactly how it works in JavaScript land. So in JavaScript, really we are holding on to memory that the garbage collector can never reason about and say, yeah, this is safe to release. Instead, we just keep allocating more memory, and something somewhere is holding on to a reference to it, and the garbage collector just has to throw up its hands and go, I don't know, so let's just keep it around. So depending on how your memory leak is happening, it can be super slow. I've seen memory leaks take weeks before you even notice on the graph, and it's not for 2 months that all of a sudden your Node.js process is running out of memory. And I've been the cause of memory leaks that have taken 5 minutes, and it blows up the whole server. So it's kind of a fine art to, first of all, detect a memory leak, but then also trying to troubleshoot a memory leak, which is always fun. So the main thing is, some of the key things to look out for really are, where am I allocating an object, and maybe scope isn't where I think it is. Maybe I'm inheriting the scope or assigning it in a closure, function above. Event emitters can be sneaky because we're adding a reference to something and then assuming the event emitter is going to clean it up, and well, maybe it won't. But we do have some tools. Again, the first and foremost thing that I've enjoyed playing with is the inspect flag if you're using Node 6. It's super cool to be able to use the Chrome Dev Tools, take a heap snapshot, get an idea of what's in memory, all from your browser on your desktop. It's really great. Again, the warning, it is still considered experimental. Usability is a little bit of a concern. It's not super usable, and it kind of is funky, but there's a lot of work going on in the open source project to help make it more predictable and more appropriate to be doing debugging inside of Node. But we also have JavaScript to help. There's a great module called heap dump. Heap dump is kind of a very similar thing as the inspect flag, but kind of done, you can instrument your code to do it on demand. So what it does is it allows you to then take a heap snapshot. Maybe you set up a special route, an internal route on your app. And then when you call that route, it will trigger heap dump to make the snapshot, save it off to disk, and then now you have an idea of what's in memory inside of your Node.js application. But, and solid, definitely not to be outdone. Just like CPU profiling, we also have heap snapshots that can be generated in the browser in real time. So again, it's another great way to visualize what's happening inside your app and kind of dig a little deeper, especially on troublesome memory leaks, because I'll tell you, it's not easy. Unless you're a pro and you're debugging memory leaks all the time, you're gonna fight with it for a little bit to try to even understand what V8 is telling you. So kind of to wrap it up, in summary, keep your Node version up to date. Definitely keep an eye out. Follow Node.js on Twitter. There are security releases for Node, especially for the LTS version. It's a big deal. So keep up to date. Know about your modules. Know about the module security. If you're not interested in paying a company like Snyk to get vulnerabilities, Node Security Project, part of the Node Foundation. Support that. Use that. When you're running your Node.js process, have a restart policy. We recommend the OS. Great tools already built in, maintained, tested. You know it's going to work. Finally, be aware for your application's CPU usage and watch for hotspots. A lot of great monitoring will help look for response times. And depending on your application, response times may be your first clue that you have a CPU issue. So definitely, if you start seeing increases in your response times, look, hey, what did we add recently? Could it be the event loop getting stalled out somewhere that we don't know? And finally, always keep track of your application's memory usage. In Node, this can be tricky, right? We're a garbage collected language, so what is a lot of memory before the GC kicks in, right? So try to profile it, keep an eye on what your memory usage is, so when you're running in production, you know when it's actually high versus, nope, we're just running normal, everything's great. So that's all I have. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the talks. I think we have a little bit for questions, if anyone has a question. Yep.
So when you keep up the different versions, would you recommend something like NVM?
In production, I don't recommend something like NVM.
Repeat the question.
Sure. So the question was, when you're trying to keep up with multiple versions, is a tool like NVM something that you'd recommend using? And I would say no. For production, I actually don't recommend using NVM. Because for the most part in production, you're not interested in being able to switch between versions, much like you are on your development machine, or maybe even a staging environment, where you're concerned about how do I test my application, and I want to cover a bunch of bases. By production, that should really be an answered question. You want to know the version you're running, you want to know it works for that version, and until there is a security update or a reason to do your update for Node, you want to kind of keep it as is. So that would be my recommendation for that. Anyone else? Any other questions? All right. Thank you.